exploring how we understand and live urban spaces.
Okay, here is a little experiment. Take a walk through San Siro, a neighborhood in western Milan. Start on one end. Roads of public housing from the 1970s. Elevators that barely work. Peeling paint. People are waiting years for promised repairs. Then, turn a corner, and boom, you have time traveled. Suddenly, you're looking at sleek new apartment blocks. Gated entries, glassed balconies, private parking. Same neighborhood, same name, and two different cities. Seemingly, at least.
And we just kept on thinking, how does this happen? How can inequality live so quietly next door to luxury? Not just to talk about buildings, but to ask a bigger question. What kind of logic is shaping Milan today?
We asked this question to people who see the city from a different angle. One of them is Hurricane, Ivan Manupelli, an Italian comic artist who has been documenting Milan's transformation through sharp, satirical drawings. His latest comic is titled Milano Horror Stories.
The urban regeneration of Milan created a very, very, very poor narrative.
Molto scadente.
However, at the beginning, he had a strong impact, and we were told that he was an all-inclusive city, a green city.
Inclusiva, che è una città green.
But the story was almost Orwellian. Certain words were used, and then actions were taken, not just subtly contrary, but drastically opposite.
Opposto, ma in un modo proprio drasticamente opposto. Ad esempio,
for example, public water is supposed to be a common good, yet they were distributing it in Tetra Pak cartons, meaning they were handing out the major's water in highly polluting packaging. Or now, to counteract heat waves, which are getting worse because they are building like crazy, they've promoted the installation of pergolas. 2 pergolas in all of Milan, by the way. And they're small and full of holes. I saw photos where the mayor and part of the city council were there, sweating profusely, trying to pretend otherwise.
Parte della giunta, sudatissimi, ma che dovevano fingere.
This feeling of being slowly pushed out, of not fitting into the city's glossy new image, isn't rare. It's become the rule, not the exception. It's a story we've heard again and again. In the interviews, in the data, in the streets. The housing crisis in Milan isn't a glitch, it's a feature.
We are Giulia, Michael, and Lo Yu, 2 international urban planning students and a PhD researcher at Politecnico di Milano. And in this podcast, we try to read Milan for what it is, a city that's transforming, expanding, regenerating. But for whom? Over 3 short episodes, we look at the cracks these changes leave behind. Wealth building up in some places, while other neighborhoods are emptied out. Spaces are turning into commodities. Milan is reaching ahead, but it's not a race everyone gets to run. It's a city being built for those who can afford it. The rest push further to the margins. But is that the case? And what are the spatial implications and impacts of a city that is becoming polarized? This is Urbinary, Episode 1, Living the Divide, Drawing the Line, starts right now.
In Milan's critical planning circles today, 2 camps are squaring off. One reads the city as the child of sheer deregulation. The market grabbed the wheel and urban planning stepped aside. The other claims the opposite. There is a deliberate blueprint where planning itself, farewell to some grand integrated visions of the 60s and 80s, becomes the market's preferred tool. The argument is back on the table because the materiality has pierced the glossy storytelling. The cost of reproducing the city's workforce is soaring. The everyday quality of life is slipping. And those new 10-story towers stand as concrete evidence of the Salva Milano affair.
Neoliberalism is a buzzword that pops up every time we dissect Milan's urban policy over the past decade. But what does it mean when we stick that label onto Milan? In public debate, there is a clear year zero, 2015, the year of Expo, seen as the moment the city completely changed its skin. The dominant narrative, the one you catch on talk shows and read about in the papers, portrays Expo as a spark that ignited 10 years of success, a forceful comeback to the center stage, a re-centralization of Milan against the backdrop of the urban century.
Largely, it's true. Expo gave Milan the chance to step onto the stage of the world's greatest cities. Yet, rather than being a simple Milanese spin on a global trend, Expo, and everything it signified and still represents, is the outcome of a long process. It begins with the competitiveness-driven modernization promoted by the center-right in the late 1990s, moves through the broad political consensus behind real estate growth in the early 2000s, and culminates in today's global Milan, embodied by the urban development choices of center-left administrations and the dense ecosystem of actors operating in the city.
Today, Milan seems to reflect Richard Florida's idea of a creative global city, a new engine of growth that has replaced the old factories. For decades, those factories shaped the city's landscape and remain a key reference point, both in the times of urban expansion and in the phases of decentralization. This new vision has strong political implications. As economic power and innovation concentrate in city, the traditional role of the nation-state and of large-scale planning risk become less relevant.
And so, neoliberalism, just as we were saying, sounds abstract, right? At first glance, it sounds like something professors argue about at the conferences. But it shaped the world we live in. It's a way of thinking about society, one that says human well-being is best achieved through market freedom, private properties, and minimal government interferences. Shrink the state, let competition do the work. In simple terms, let the market decide. Since the 1980s, it has been guiding how government work by cutting public spending, privatizing service, and removing regulations. But here is David Harvey's sharper take. Neoliberalism is not just about freedom or efficiency. It's a class project, a way to restrict power, putting wealth and decision-making into fewer hands.
This logic also spills into urban planning. Planning, once for a better city, becomes a tool for economic competition. Cities rebrand themselves, loosen regulations, and chase visibility and growth. Scholars call this entrepreneurial planning. The city is no longer just a place to live, it's a product to sell. Public space becomes a capital stage. If you can't afford the ticket, you're not in the show. Instead of building inclusive infrastructure, cities like Milan focus on festivals, mega projects, and iconic towers. It brings investment, but also drives up land prices, displaces tenants, and sidelines public housing. So, when we talk about neoliberal urbanism, we're not just describing a new skyline. We're describing a new urban order, one that quietly decides who gets to stay and who gets pushed out.
Does it make sense to speak of neoliberalism in Milan? Can the city's transformation be pinned on a single transscalar vector?
E quindi, per un certo periodo è andata così.
For a while, that's just how things went. Then another shift kicked in. Private capital flows started converging here. And no, the credit isn't all due to the Expo or to whoever happened to be in office.
Che non è che tutto questo sia ascrivibile al merito, diciamo, di avere fatto di chi ha fatto l'Expo.
Because private money follows where public money has already been poured, and all the public money was channeled right here.
Pubblici, e capitali pubblici erano stati concentrati tutti qua.
That point is crucial. Territorial gaps were engineered from top down. Lucas is right. This is a global change. States used to spread resources across their territories. With neoliberalism, they began concentrating them in winning zones, winning areas, winning cities, competitive on global stage.
Poi, con l'avvento del neoliberalismo, gli stati hanno cominciato a concentrare le risorse in zone vincenti, aree vincenti, città vincenti, competitive sul territorio globale.
Because when you talk about neoliberalism, my question is, what is it? And it looks like a sort of all-powerful dark force, and maybe it's too vague, and there is a risk to be a little bit naive using this construct, this idea.
We heard them back to back. Lucia Tozzi, journalist and author of L'invenzione di Milano, culto della comunicazione e politiche urbane, and Raffaella Saporito, associate professor at Bocconi. Tozzi uses neoliberalism as a broad lens. She looks at Milan's rise through global capital flows and policies that channel public money into winning cities. Saporito, instead, reminds us not to lose sight of the details, local neighborhoods, key players, and everyday choices. These perspectives aren't in conflict. They are like two settings on the same lens. One shows us the big picture, the other brings the close-up into focus. Together, they help us to see Milan moving between global forces and local dynamics.
Zoom out, zoom in. Inside Urbanary, our debate follows the same rhythm. We quarrel over labels, but agree on one premise. Milan is Milan, and it deserves rigorous, on-the-ground scrutiny. The forces reshaping the city are not a single tide, but intersecting currents, each with its source. Taking together, they have produced a crunch in the urban economy that no single lens can decode. To map that equation of change, we need multiple viewpoints and case-specific evidence. Only then can the larger pattern start to appear. All right, before we sign off, let's stick with Milan for a sec and unpack that entrepreneurial planning we just teased. Through planning tools like the Piano di Governo del Territorio, the city was reshaped with a new mission: sustainability, mobility, culture, but also private investment, land valorization, and global branding. Projects like Porta Nuova symbolized this shift: sleek, vertical, investment ready.
The PGT captures a deeper contradiction in Milan's planning. It talks about social housing, local communities, and inclusive neighborhoods. But at the same time, it traces private capital, global branding, and cooperative partnerships. Its urban policy caught between two logics: market-first strategies and welfare-sounding promises. A neoliberal framework, softened by the social rhetoric. And one of the clearest displays this tension shows up as housing.
As urban scholar Alessandro Coppola, professor of urban planning, policy, and design at Politecnico di Milano, told us during an interview,
the ones who are best positioned to stay in Milan are the ones who have who already have an apartment of their own, possession. So to be owners already is a strong predictor of the ability to stay in the city, or to be part of a family with important assets that can be mobilized in order to access housing. And so now we have, in terms of the setting of prices, we have the most liberalized rental market in Europe, in Italy, as compared to the one in France, for example, to even Spain, that has been re-regulating its rental market in the last decade, and absolutely also compared to Germany. Only the UK is a reference that is comparable to Italy, and even a little bit more neoliberal in the sense that
Housing, you'll see, sits at the heart of every episode in this brief podcast series. In San Siro, we will watch different visions of urban life. Community and commerce rub against each other. In this Alba Milano story, a legal shortcut meant to fast-track construction has left buyers stuck in half-finished homes.
Once property is only an asset, every market tremor reverberates through the lives inside those walls. That's all for this first episode. Thanks for listening. This is Urbanary.
Urbanary is produced in collaboration with Polyradio and the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies at Politecnico di Milano.